Are your people working hard but not reaching their full potential? The problem is not effort, it is development. At the Modern Observer Group, we transform workforce development into real performance. Our human-centered achievement programs help your team think better, communicate stronger, and execute at a higher level. That means higher employee engagement, stronger leadership, and measurable results across your organization. If you want a workforce that performs, leads, and delivers, it is time to invest in your people. Visit modernobserver.com and discover how the Modern Observer Group helps you build a workforce that wins.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And used to be funny, Dr. Lopkin, when we were on terrestrial radio, the libtards in the Democratic Party. And it was kind of funny. Bernie was an anomaly. He was kind of funny, the old Jewish guy, but feel the burn, blah, blah, blah. Well, fast forward over 10 years later, and it's not so funny, is it, anymore, Dr. Lopkin?
No, it really isn't. And, one of the things I'm finding really amazing is the terror that is going through the Democratic Party, because they've just realized what we've been talking about for years, that they have lost control of the party.
They've abdicated, yes. And we were talking before, doing the prep before the show. Rasmussen, he had a little clip, the famous poll. He was talking about Bernie, our beloved self-hating Jew, and how he's responsible, really, because he was the canary in the coal mine. In 2016, it was feel the burn, Bernie, the old Jewish guy from Vermont, and they rigged it so Hillary, and then they did the same thing and rallied their forces to upend him in 2020. And guess what? The result of all that was, in other words, failure to take him seriously and do something about it. So it's a very scary situation. Yet New York City, now it's metastasized to Colorado, still a blue state, and you have a vehement anti-Semite, anti-Israeli, and I'll say anti-American, Madami supported a candidate. Again, the same modus operandi, because it's really interesting. It's kind of failed quasi-intellectuals. She's going for a PhD and she's working for like Starbucks as a coffee prep person. Same kind of thing with the one in New York, that she's 6 years studying for her master's. I have no idea how that happens, but rich, stupid moron. And this is what you're getting. They don't not only oppose Israel, which is fine. That's fine. But they're vehement anti-Semites, your thoughts, and anti-Americans.
Yeah, it is ridiculous how far the left has gone. And New York City is now starting to pay the price. Now, before I get into that, I just want to make sure our listeners know, we're saying that the Democrats rigged the election against Bernie Sanders. This is not a matter of opinion. The Democratic National Committee was taken to court over the 2016 election because Bernie's supporters said it was rigged against them. The case was thrown out because the folks bringing it did not have standing. But prior to the case being thrown out, the DNC had to file a response, and their response, and you can find the court documents, they essentially said, it's our primary. We can do whatever we want. So there was not even any denials that they rigged the election against Bernie. And now the backlash,
the party of democracy.
Right. And now the backlash is coming against them. Now, New York is very, very screwed because thanks to the Democratic Socialists taking so many primaries, The exodus from New York is accelerating. Sergey Brin, founder of Google, just dumped over $1 billion of real estate in New York for pennies on the dollar, just so he could get out and New York couldn't tax him on it.
Yes, I'm going to see that's going to happen more and more.
Yep.
However, I don't really give a shit because New York city dwellers and New York in general deserve everything they get. Okay, they voted for these idiots, and too bad. Sometimes payback's a bitch, isn't it?
It really is. Now, I'm not completely convinced that these people can win the general. I mean, New York City, it's going to be close. If they could do it anywhere, that's where they could do it. But the fact of the matter is, winning a primary is very different from winning a general election. The primaries on both sides are dominated by the radicals. It's the radical right that shows up most often in the Republican primaries. It's the radical left that shows up most often in the Democratic.
Okay, I need to take exception to that. I'm sorry, I have to take exception to that. Yeah, the radical right, you could say, yeah. There's, at this point in time, Dr. Lopkin, there is no comparison between the two. None.
No, there isn't a comparison.
None.
But it is the most radical parts of the party, and this has gone on for 40 years, that show up in the primaries. The centrists, the more independent folks, they tend to stay home during the primaries. And it's been like this forever. So, yes, the radical left put their candidates in. But now they're going to have to convince the centrists, the independents, and the few Republicans that are left in New York City. And I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do it. If they do, I'll go on record right now and saying it's the death of New York City.
It is the absolute death. Any business person, any financial entity, including Wall Street, that would stick around needs to see a collective psychiatrist. Do you agree with that, Dr. Lopkin?
I think that would help, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. I think
I'm saying if these radicals actually do take power in New York City, the exodus will be at a light speed.
The exodus is
going
like
to Wall Street.
Wall Street, big business. You're going to see a massive exodus. But I think the bigger problem that's allowing these folks to take power, and giving credit where credit is due, it was my wife that actually brought this up. They're being supported by younger Americans whose parents were not here during the 70s. We're talking about new immigrants, folks that have no idea about the history of New York City. And so they don't realize that in the 70s, this was tried. It bankrupted the city. The Bronx burnt. And I mean that literally. Buildings were burned to the ground. Real estate owners abandoned the city. Businesses abandoned the city. The only difference between what happened then and what happened now is that Ford told the city, drop dead, you're on your own. And Trump has indicated that he will actually try to bail out the city because he is a New Yorker. I hope he does not do that. I hope, quite frankly, it's not something the president can do without Congress. I hope Congress stands strong and go, no, you made your bed, now you've got to lie in it.
100%. Now, to the Nationals, I 100% agree with you. I think behind closed doors, what's left of any sane Democrat, they're panicking like crazy because these people are not going to win in Indiana. Are you out of your mind? And I really believe, Lopkin, what do you think of this? I believe there's a real good chance that a radical communist could become their nameplate in for the presidential election.
It's very possible, and that will kill their chances in the nationals. And it's not just behind closed doors. There have been a number of Democrats who've come out, said, we've lost control, we're in big trouble, we've got to stop this somehow. But now it's closing the barn door after the horses have gotten out.
Well done. Yes, it's too late. And I still say that Carvel, the Dershowitz, I give them credit because they stood ground, unlike Chucky Schumer and Slotkin and our own genius Blumenthal. No courage. It's ballless.
No, they have no courage. And worse, the political opportunists like Chris Murphy are jumping on the bandwagon. Chris Murphy just came out pushing a bill to make the federal minimum wage $25. Ask San Francisco and Seattle what happened when they forced minimum wage up above 15. Businesses fled. The cities collapsed. Well, Murphy wants to do that to the whole country.
Murphy, unfortunately, we're in Connecticut for the time being, Dr. Lopkin,
Yes.
but is basically, I'm sorry, it's politically incorrect, but he's mentally retarded. And he doesn't have the internal belief or the wherewithal to understand he's doing this to position himself within the retard party. And he doesn't understand that his chances, and you brought it up like months ago, of winning the presidential election is what? Or is even his party nomination is what, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, somewhere between 0 and 2%. That's just about how his predecessor Chris Dodd did. When Chris Dodd ran for president, he never beat the margin of error at any of the polls. Murphy will. I want him to run.
It will be good entertainment. And how dumb can you be? Because you could have a first-year economics major at like Billy Bob University would know. I believe, I'm going to go out on a limb. It could be somewhat inflationary, Dr. Lopkin. Do you think? And how many small businesses would go under?
Somewhat is putting it mildly. Small businesses are 50% of the businesses in the United States, according to the SBA. None of them can survive a $25 minimum wage. They can't survive that in California, in Seattle, in Connecticut, where minimum wage is already above $16. Never mind places like Pennsylvania, Arkansas, Georgia, where their minimum wage is the federal minimum wage of $7.25. Could you imagine having to more than triple your payroll just to keep people as they are?
Well, Chris Murphy is not exactly an economics genius, given the fact he walked away from his house and his wife. But that's... And it's really funny, Dr. Lopkin. I think off camera, so to speak, a month ago, whatever, you were talking about Ned Lamont has a challenger. So I was watching some YouTube, and they had a commercial for him and his gubernatorial ambitions. And he basically is moving way to the left. And I love this. You might get a kick out of this. And maybe our listeners who know anything about Connecticut, he says, we got to tax corporations more. And I'm thinking, are there any corporations left in Connecticut?
If they raise the taxes on corporations, there won't be any left. I've had conversations with a number of folks in the Connecticut government. And I don't know where they got what they're smoking. Weed is legal here, but whatever it is, I want some of it, because they have no idea what reality is. They think people want to move here. They think this is the golden state. It's like, I have started telling people Connecticut is the California of the East Coast. And I don't mean that in a sunshine vacation type of way. I mean government overreached, overtaxation, and people fleeing.
Yeah, I would have to say I'll go one step further. You work a lot, I believe, with youth in terms of apprenticeships and things like that. If you graduated at Central Connecticut State University, I don't think you could leave unless something's wrong with you. How fast would you leave this state? Where are you going to work in Connecticut? The Etna? Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, the job market, and that's another thing. If you take a look at the state of Connecticut, this is as deep blue as you get. I mean, yeah, we're probably not as blue as California, but they might be the only ones that are bluer than us. And the fact of the matter is, take a look at the recent surveys. We are in the bottom 5 for business. We're in the bottom 5 for tourism. We're in the bottom 5 for people wanting to come here. We are hemorrhaging people, and yet the leftist Democrats want to take this model and apply it all over the country. It'll become a race to the bottom.
Yeah, no question about it. I do think it's very interesting. Even like they can't even run a university. UConn, I have no idea. It's like millions in debt. Like, how does that even happen? But it is interesting what's going on with the Democrats. But you juxtapose that to the people from Europe and other places or around the world, actually, that are visiting America. Some were told, especially in Europe, on how crappy this is, but they've been basically awakened. They, unlike our Democratic friends, in quotations, these people, hey, America's awesome.
Yeah, America now has 3 million new ambassadors. These folks are going home and they are telling people how amazing America is. And a lot of them have posted the videos on social media. Most of the videos are simply, oh my God, I can't believe this. They're showing all of the things they're seeing. But there have been a lot of these videos that these folks are actually angry because, one, they were told America was dangerous for them. They were told they were going to be rounded up and deported if they came here. They were told that this was a miserable place to be. And they showed up and saw amazing hospitality from the average American, never mind the companies and FIFA and all of the folks that, had something to gain. They showed up, were flabbergasted by the things that we take for granted every day. The top 4 things that I have seen over and over again, people talking about: air conditioning, ranch dressing, free refills on soft drinks, and the sheer number of options we have at every restaurant and every market. Take a look at the videos for all of these folks exploring Walmart and Buc-ee's for the first time. They can't even believe that we have so many things that we can just go pick up, and 90% of the things they have, which these folks were trying everything, and it was all cheaper than what they pay for less options, less quality in Europe, Japan. There was one French video I saw where the guy went to Costco and he was talking about the fact that the Costco that he walked into was bigger than his village. And he said, we need to start a revolution to get Costco to come to France. They want American businesses coming to Europe, which, of course,
good luck,
the European Union doesn't want. They're looking at American businesses as we can tax them and not have them use any of our resources.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting. But what I also kind of touched my heart is I saw a little clip of a good old boy from Texas invited a bunch of, I think, French people, young people, to his ranch, and they're going four-wheeling. They're eating, pulled pork, and the French guys were saying, I need to get a green card, or I need to come here, whatever.
Yes.
And I loved it with the Japanese in Dallas, and they were like saying how much they love Texas and Dallas, and then they started singing like classic American songs like Sweet Caroline. I mean, it was awesome.
That was it. That was something that amazed me. Who knew the theme songs for the World Cup were going to be Take Me Home, Country Roads, and Sweet Caroline?
Yeah, excellent. It's really interesting because you look at that juxtaposed to our earlier topic, the Democratic Party, who basically hates America, and it's not just speculation, it's reflected in polls, CNN polls, isn't it?
It is. CNN has done this poll over the years, and they found over the last 10 years, registered Republicans, 10 years ago, 90% were proud of America. Now, 90% are proud of America. 10 years ago, 60% of Democrats were proud of America. Now, 24%. And it's dropping. Now, you've seen a small drop off in independence also, but not nearly to that. I think it was somewhere along the line of 80% of independents were proud of America 10 years ago, and 70% are proud of it now. So you're talking about the folks that really lean to the left are the ones that suddenly they're not proud.
I think it gets back to there's many factors, Doctor, but I think one of the key factors, something we talk about often or have talked about often, and that is the elite colleges. I think they're turning out these nutcases.
They are, but it's not just the elite colleges. This is a concerted effort. The Trump administration has just announced a DOJ investigation, a grand jury investigation out of the Southern District of New York, which, as far as AGs are concerned, that's the most powerful seat there is in the Justice Department. And they are investigating Singham, the Chinese tech mogul who has been funding socialist groups, communist groups.
Yep.
These guys, Singham, Soros, several Middle Eastern countries have been flooding these universities with grants and scholarships so that they can take control of the curriculum.
Which they have.
Yes.
Which they have.
They were very successful doing this.
They did a great job. Yes, I actually believe that. Now, do you know what? It's a very big milestone this week, and I'm sure the doctor can surmise what it is. It's a 20th anniversary of what, Dr. Lopkin? The Inconvenient Truth.
Oh, yes.
And very interesting. Al Gore has made a fortune because all leftists make a fortune. Just ask Nancy Pelosi on their beliefs or lack thereof. And in the Inconvenient Truth, he states that the Arctic ice cap will be gone, would be gone now. I think he said in 8 years. The National Glacier Park would be no longer with us, and so on and so on and so on. But he's sticking to the story. You gotta like that. I'm sticking to it.
And they always do. They just change the names. In the 70s, we were told growing up that by now the planet was going to be in another ice age. Glaciers were going to have overtaken Canada completely. We were going to have high temperatures, maybe in the 50s if we were lucky. We were going to be freezing to death.
Yeah, that was in the 70s, right?
Yes, that was in the 70s.
Yeah.
Then by the 80s and 90s, when they realized none of that was going to happen, they changed it to global warming. And as it was shown in An Inconvenient Truth, We were going to lose the ice caps altogether. Everything was
No
going
doubt.
to be a desert. And that,
Climate refugees.
yes, and when those predictions failed to come true, they changed it to climate change. And the big problem here is that all of these predictions are made on bad data. Because, and this was proven 20 years ago, at the time An Inconvenient Truth was coming out, because all of the studies that An Inconvenient Truth was based on cherry-picked data. So they weren't using all of the climate data going back the hundreds of years that we actually have some sort of record for. They were just choosing the data that proved the point they wanted to make, which is why none of those predictions have come true. Now, yes, is the climate changing? Absolutely. The climate has been changing since the planet was formed. And it does this on a cyclical basis. It gets hotter, it gets colder, it gets hotter, it gets colder. This was the data that An Inconvenient Truth omitted. So yes, when that cycle is going into a hotter cycle, yes, things like greenhouse gases, and that is a thing. We're not saying that that doesn't have an effect.
And I definitely agree with that. Yes.
Right. That is exacerbated. And so the insane people who are pushing this agenda extrapolate that out, that it's always going to be that way and it's always going to be getting worse. And we know for a fact that's not the case. The cycle changes, the climate gets cooler, that actually offsets some of the damage that's been done by climate change. In fact, one of the big things that knocked the climate change story out of all of their predictions was COVID, because they never took a pandemic into consideration. During COVID, because people were isolated, because they weren't going places, because things were shutting down, climate change actually retreated a bit. And guess what? If you take a look historically, we actually have one of those pandemics every 100 years, which is something else they did not take into consideration.
That is correct. Yes. In fact, the last one after World War I think killed more people, definitely killed more people than the war itself. Yeah,
Yes.
very interesting. But it does have ramifications like everything else. You talk about Europe and European visitors for the World Cup. Well, Europeans, essentially, many European countries, that is, essentially banned, for lack of a better word, air conditioning because it was a global threat. And look at all the Green New Deal. Go ahead.
They banned coal power. They banned a lot of oil drilling, natural gas, because they were saying, oh, we've got to make sure that we fight global warming, we fight climate change. Now, again, yes, do we need to do certain things to make sure that the climate change does not get out of control? Absolutely. There are real threats. However, Europe actually made the cure more dangerous than the threat, because now most of the continent is completely dependent on Russian oil.
That is correct. I also think there was a degree of control issues with the Democratic and liberal constituencies around the world, and the green or global warming was a great way to seize and have an excuse to seize the means of production. Correct, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, it wasn't just global warming. If you take a look, they did it to prevent climate change. Remember, we all used to have incandescent bulbs. Now you can't even get those anymore. Most businesses were able to pivot. I'm talking about the businesses that manufactured the bulbs. But if you remember, the US consumer went through a period where they had to get these compact fluorescent bulbs, which not only were more expensive, they were terrible. We were told, oh, but you only have to buy one to last you 20 years. They didn't. They lasted maybe a year or two. And they were actually worse for the environment when disposed of.
So yes, they were. There was a huge
Yeah, so they used that to seize control of production. They did the same thing with COVID. They decided what businesses were essential. So anytime there's a crisis, this is how they take advantage of it.
No question about it. To close on a lighter note, Dr. Lopkin, concerning but lighter, I don't know if you saw it. They had someone caught on camera, a DEI executive for a major investment institution in New York City, throwing out the trash that was in a Knicks painted garbage can. She threw it in the street and then went home with her garbage can. I have no idea why you don't want to do that. And guess what? She was fired. How happy was that company when they saw her do that and knew they had an excuse to get rid of? They were doing rumba dances around the office.
I'm sure they were. As to why you'd want to take it with you, I mean, the Knicks made an amazing comeback to win the finals. So, yeah, I can understand why you'd want your Knicks garbage can. But I think they were obviously looking for an excuse to fire her.
100%.
If you take a look at corporate websites over the past 5 years, you went from DEI being front and center on the homepage of the website.
Correct.
To most have eliminated it altogether. Those that do have it, if you go down to the footer, you might find a link to their DEI page.
Yeah, how'd that go, Mrs. Lincoln? Yeah, it was a great idea while it lasted. Well, Dr. Lopkin, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Radio. We'll be back next week. And our listeners can always be a part of the show, can't they?
Yes, we want to hear what you have to say. You can contact us at xvadio.com/connect. You can also message us through the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Carnivore Radio wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, you can catch every episode at Carnivore Radio's website, xvadio.com, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
See you next week, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you then.